My son-in-law forgot his cell phone at my house. That sentence sounds simple enough, doesn't it? The kind of thing that happens to everyone. Brian had come by on a Thursday afternoon, unusual for him, since he rarely visited without Emily, to drop off some papers about Grace's estate. Still settling her affairs, 3 years after the accident. Always something left undone, always another signature needed, another form requiring my attention. He'd been in a hurry, naturally. Brian was always in a hurry. Big meeting, important client, the usual excuses that made him the center of his own universe. He'd left the phone on my kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker, and I'd noticed it only after his Tesla had already pulled out of the driveway with that distinctive electric whir. I was going to call him, tell him to swing back. I'd even picked up my own phone, started scrolling through my contacts. Then Brian's phone lit up, a message notification. The screen showed a preview, and my hand froze mid-air, the coffee cup I'd been holding suddenly forgotten. The photo that appeared was my wife, Grace. Gone for 3 years, yet there she was, smiling at me from my son-in-law's phone. Except it wasn't the smile I remembered, not the gentle, patient one she'd shared with me through 36 years of marriage. This was different, intimate, secret. The kind of smile that exists only between two people who share something nobody else knows about. My chest tightened. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, the walls closer. The afternoon light streaming through the window seemed too bright, too harsh. The message beneath the photo read, "You always said you'd delete this. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the hype button, and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this?" I stood there for maybe 5 minutes just staring at the screen. My engineering mind, trained for 40 years to analyze problems methodically, to break complex structures down into manageable components, was struggling to process what I was seeing. The phone locked itself, went dark. I set down my coffee cup with a hand that trembled slightly. I unlocked the phone again, no passcode, because Brian was the kind of man who believed himself untouchable, invincible, and opened the message thread. Grace's name at the top. Dozens of messages stretching back 4 years, from before she was gone. I scrolled slowly, my engineer's mind cataloging information even as my heart tried to reject what I was seeing. Money transfers with amounts that made my stomach turn. Meeting times at hotels I recognized from downtown. Apologies that didn't make sense, that spoke of things I knew nothing about. And photos. Several photos of Grace, smiling that smile I'd never seen directed at me, wearing clothes I didn't remember, in places I'd never been. The most recent message was from 3 weeks before her accident. "Please, Brian, I can't keep doing this. Rick will find out." His response, "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you signed the papers. We both lose if anyone finds out, Grace, especially your husband." My vision blurred. I had to sit down. The kitchen chair felt hard beneath me, the whole world tilting slightly off its axis. I read the messages again, slowly, making sure I understood. Making sure I wasn't misinterpreting something innocent as something sinister. But there was no misinterpretation possible. The evidence was clear. I took screenshots. Every message, every photo, every transaction. My hands moved mechanically, precisely, the way they'd moved for 40 years while drafting blueprints and calculating load capacities. I'd built bridges across rivers, overpasses that carried thousands of cars daily, structures that would outlast me by centuries. I understood structural integrity. I understood how to find the weak point in any design, how to identify where stress would concentrate, where failure would begin. I also understood how to make something collapse. By the time I'd copied everything to my laptop, each file carefully named, organized into folders, backed up to 3 separate locations, 30 minutes had passed. I heard Brian's car in the driveway again, tires crunching on gravel. I placed the phone exactly where he'd left it, poured myself a glass of water with a steady hand, and waited. He burst through the door without knocking, like he owned the place. "Hey, Rick. Sorry. I think I left my phone." "Kitchen counter," I said. My voice sounded normal, steady, remarkable, really, how calm a person could sound when their world was disintegrating, when everything they believed about their life was revealing itself to be a lie. "Right where you left it." Lifesaver. He grabbed it, checked the screen quickly, scrolled through something with his thumb. "Everything okay here?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. Brian Carterson, age 38, CEO of Auralink Systems, my daughter's husband for 7 years. Tall, athletic, the kind of jaw that looked good on business magazine covers. Charismatic, they called him. Visionary. The media loved him. Investors loved him. Emily loved him. Had Grace loved him too? "Fine," I said. "Just fine." He smiled. That practiced, empty smile that had probably closed 100 deals, convinced 1,000 investors to part with their money, and headed for the door. Then he paused, hand on the doorknob, and something in his posture changed. "Hey, you didn't happen to use my phone or anything, did you? While I was gone?" The question was casual. Too casual. Like he was asking about the weather, about traffic, about nothing important. Why would I do that? No reason. Just, it unlocked itself a couple times. Weird glitch. Technology, you know? "Technology," I said. "Never works quite right, does it?" He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something else there now. Calculation, assessment, trying to figure out if I knew something, if I'd seen something. "Yeah, well, see you Sunday for dinner?" "Wouldn't miss it." After he left, I sat in the living room for 2 hours without moving. The house was silent. It had been that way for 3 years, ever since Grace was gone. Ever since the police had called to tell me her car had gone off Morrison Road in the rain, that she was gone instantly, that no one could have done anything to stop it. They had ruled it an accident. Wet roads, low visibility, a brief lapse in focus. "These things happen," the officer had said, his voice gentle but distant. "Every year, thousands lose their lives in car crashes." Grace had simply become another statistic. But Grace never got distracted while driving. She'd been meticulous about safety, almost obsessively so. It was one of the things that had made her a good mother, a good wife. Careful, thoughtful, present. She'd been a teacher for 30 years, and teachers learn to pay attention to everything, to anticipate problems before they happen. Unless she'd been upset. Unless something had been weighing on her mind so heavily that she couldn't focus. Unless she'd been crying so hard she couldn't see the road. I opened my laptop and looked at the messages again, forcing myself to read them slowly, completely, to absorb every detail. Then I opened a folder I hadn't touched in months, Grace's personal files, the ones I'd copied from her laptop after the funeral but had never brought myself to review. There were documents, photos, some videos of family gatherings and holidays, and one folder labeled, "If anything happens to me." My hand hovered over the mouse. Part of me knew that opening this folder would change everything, that there'd be no return to the comfortable illusion I'd lived in for 3 years. The illusion that Grace's accident had been simple, that our marriage had been happy, that our family had been ordinary. I clicked it. Inside was a single audio file. No video, only sound. It was dated 2 months before her passing. I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. Grace's voice filled my ears, and it took everything in me not to break down immediately. "Rick." She was crying. I could hear it in the tremor, the way she swallowed between words, the catch in her breath. "If you're listening to this, then something's happened to me, and I need you to know the truth." My vision blurred. I gripped the edge of the desk. Brian came to me 2 years ago with an investment opportunity. He said it was legitimate, that it would help secure Emily's future. He had documents, projections, everything looked professional. I signed some papers. I trusted him. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. But it was fraud, Rick. He used my name, my accounts, to hide money his company had stolen from investors. When I found out, I confronted him. He said, if I told anyone, if I told you, he'd make sure you went down with me. That legally, you'd be implicated too. That we'd lose everything. Our home, our savings, our reputation, everything we'd built together. I closed my eyes, but tears leaked out anyway. So I kept quiet. I gave him more money when he asked for it. I smiled at family dinners and pretended everything was fine. And Emily? Emily knew, Rick. She knew, and she chose him anyway. She told me to keep paying him, to keep playing along, because she couldn't lose her lifestyle, couldn't lose her house, her car, her perfect marriage to her perfect husband. Grace's breathing was ragged now, and I could hear her struggling to maintain composure, to get through what she needed to say. I'm so tired, Rick. I'm tired of lying, tired of seeing his face across the table at Sunday dinners. Tired of watching our daughter choose money over integrity, choose comfort over truth. Tired of being afraid every single day that this is the day it all comes crashing down. A long pause. If he ever hurts you, make him see what fear looks like. Make him understand what it means to lose everything. Because that's what he did to me. He took everything I valued, my honesty, my peace of mind, my relationship with my daughter, and he destroyed it all, piece by piece. The recording ended with a soft click. I sat in the dark for a long time. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and groans. Outside, I could hear traffic in the distance, a dog barking, the normal sounds of a suburban evening. Everything was exactly the same as it had been an hour ago, except nothing was the same at all. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. Not a letter, not a confession, a plan. The same kind of plan I'd used for 40 years when designing structures meant to last centuries. I broke it down into phases, identified the critical path, calculated the resources I'd need. Only this time, I was designing a collapse. Friday morning, I called Austin Williams. Austin had been my apprentice 15 years ago, fresh out of college with a structural engineering degree and more enthusiasm than sense. Bright kid, eager to learn, willing to work long hours without complaint. I'd taught him how to read blueprints, how to calculate stress loads, how to understand that every building, every bridge, every structure is only as strong as its weakest point. Find the weakness, and you understand the whole system. Apply pressure to that weakness, and you control the outcome. He'd moved on eventually, traded engineering for data analysis. Better money, he'd said. Less time in the field, more time with his family. I couldn't blame him. The construction industry was brutal. Long hours, physical labor, constant pressure. Last I'd heard, he was working in tech, something to do with databases and analytics. I'd lost touch with him after Grace was gone. The way you lose touch with everyone when grief consumes your world, and you forget how to make small talk, how to pretend you care about promotions and vacation plans. Mr. Lawson? His voice was surprised when he answered. Is that really you? It's Rick, Austin. How many times do I have to tell you? Old habits? He sounded genuinely pleased. God, it's been what? 3 years? How are you holding up? Better, I lied smoothly. Listen, I know this is random, but are you free for coffee this afternoon? Thought it'd be nice to catch up. Absolutely, yeah. I'd love that. How about that place on 5th Street? The one with the exposed brick? Perfect. See you at 3. We met at the cafe downtown, one of those places with exposed brick and overpriced lattes, where everyone was working on laptops and pretending to write screenplays. The kind of place that hadn't existed when I was young, but now seemed to be on every corner. Austin had put on a little weight, lost a little hair, but his handshake was still firm and his eyes still had that eager brightness I remembered. We talked about nothing for 20 minutes. His wife, his kid, his job. I let him fill the silence, nodding in the right places, asking the questions people expect. How old was his daughter now? 5, he said, already in kindergarten. Did they like their neighborhood? It was good, quiet, good schools. Was the job treating him well? He hesitated on that one, just for a second, but recovered. Then, casually, as if it had just occurred to me, "You still in tech?" "Yeah, actually. I'm at Oralink Systems now. Been there about 2 years." I took a sip of coffee, made sure my expression didn't change. "Oralink. That's Brian Carterson's company, isn't it?" "It is." Austin's expression shifted slightly, something I might have missed if I hadn't been watching for it. A tightening around his eyes, a stiffness in his shoulders. He's your son-in-law, right? Small world. Very small. I set down my cup. What's it like working there? Austin glanced around, a nervous habit I remembered from when he was my apprentice, always checking to see if anyone was listening when he was about to say something he shouldn't. It's fine. Good benefits, decent pay. The work is interesting. But? He hesitated. But what? You got tense when I mentioned Brian's name, and you just checked to see if anyone was listening. I taught you better than that, Austin. If you're going to lie, commit to it. Austin laughed uncomfortably. You always were too observant. He lowered his voice. Look, Rick, I probably shouldn't say anything, but there are some things about the company that don't add up. Financial discrepancies. Money moving around in ways that don't make sense. What kind of money? Donations, investments, that kind of thing. I'm not high enough up to see the full picture, but I've noticed patterns. You work with data long enough, you start to see things. Accounts that show activity and then get scrubbed from the system. Transfers that disappear from the books a month later, like they never happened. He rubbed his face, and I could see the ethical struggle playing out behind his eyes. I saw one account last month, a donor named Grace Lawson, your wife's name. It struck me as strange because, well, I'm sorry to bring it up, but she passed away years ago, right? Yet there were transfers showing up as recent as 6 months ago. My expression didn't change. Years of managing construction crews and dealing with bureaucrats had taught me how to keep my face neutral when necessary, how to hide surprise or anger or fear. That is strange. I thought maybe it was a clerical error, or maybe someone with the same name. But then I saw the account history, and it went back 5 years. The amounts were significant. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, total. And the pattern? It looked like blackmail, Rick. Regular payments, increasing over time, always to the same offshore account. I nodded slowly, taking it in, piecing it into the picture I was already forming. So Grace's payments had continued even after she was gone, which meant Brian had been falsifying records, making it look like the fraud was still ongoing. Building his defense, probably. If he was ever caught, he could claim Grace was the mastermind and he'd just been following her instructions. Austin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay. How much do you value your job at Oralink? He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, if you discovered that your boss was committing fraud, serious fraud, the kind that could destroy people's lives, bankrupt pension funds, ruin families, would you help expose it? Even if it meant putting your career at risk? Even if it meant Brian might come after you, might destroy your reputation, might make sure you never work in this industry again? The color drained from Austin's face. Rick, what are you talking about? I told him. Not everything. Not Grace's recording or the messages on Brian's phone. But enough. Enough to make him realize the discrepancies he'd noticed weren't mistakes. They were theft, and they were tied to my late wife. that Brian Carterson wasn't just a poor leader or a corrupt executive, but a criminal whose actions had destroyed a good woman's life. When I finished, Austin sat back in his chair, his coffee forgotten, going cold. Jesus Christ. I need someone inside the company, I said quietly. Someone who can access the financial records without raising flags. Someone who understands data systems well enough to pull information without leaving a trail. Someone I can trust. That's insane. If Brian found out, I'd be fired. Worse than fired, he'd destroy my reputation. I'd never work in tech again. Maybe never work anywhere again. I have a wife, Rick, a kid, a mortgage. I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. Then why are you asking me? I looked at him directly. Because you're the only person I know who still believes that right matters more than convenient. Because I remember the kid who quit a high-paying job because his boss asked him to falsify inspection reports. Because you're the only one I trust to do this without turning it into something it isn't. I'm not asking you to break the law, Austin. I'm asking you to help me prove that Brian already did. And if I say no, then I'll find another way. It'll take longer, be messier, and there's a risk he'll erase his tracks before I can stop him, and that others might get hurt while I figure this out alone. I paused. When Grace was gone, she believed I'd never uncover what he'd done to her, that his secret would go with her. I can't let her be right about that. Austin stared at his coffee for a long time. I watched emotions play across his face, fear, anger, sympathy, calculation. He had a family to protect. But he also had principles. Finally, he looked up at me. What do you need? I spent the weekend reviewing everything I had. The messages from Brian's phone, the audio recording from Grace, the fragments of information Austin had mentioned. I cross-referenced dates, amounts, account numbers. I built a timeline, the way I used to build project schedules when I was managing bridge construction. Everything connected. Everything had to flow logically from one point to the next. Grace had been approached by Brian 4 years ago. He'd pitched her on an investment opportunity, a way to help fund Oralink's expansion while generating returns for her personal portfolio. She'd been hesitant, but Brian had been persuasive. He'd brought her documents, financial projections, testimonials from other investors. More importantly, Emily had encouraged her. Their daughter, their only child, telling her mother that Brian was brilliant, that this was a chance to be part of something revolutionary, that they should support him as a family. So Grace had signed the papers. The initial investment was legitimate. Or it appeared to be. Grace had put in $50,000, and 6 months later, she'd received a return of $8,000. It all seemed above board, but 6 months after that, Brian had come back asking for more. And then more again. The amounts grew larger, 100,000, then 200,000. The paperwork grew vaguer, full of technical language and legal disclaimers. And by the time Grace had realized something was wrong, she was already implicated. Brian had used her accounts to funnel stolen investor funds through shell companies. He'd created false documentation showing that Grace had authorized the transfers, making her legally liable if the fraud was ever discovered. And then he'd told her the truth. If she went to the police, if she told me, if she did anything except continue cooperating, he'd make sure we both went to prison. She'd believed him. Why wouldn't she? Brian was a CEO, sophisticated, connected. He knew lawyers, accountants, people with power. He could make problems disappear or make them worse, depending on his mood. Grace was a retired teacher who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket, who'd spent her entire life following the rules. So she'd paid him, and paid him, and paid him. Until 3 weeks before she was gone, when she'd finally gathered the courage to say no. I thought about that drive on Morrison Road, about Grace crying so hard she couldn't see, her mind spinning with fear and shame and guilt, about how easy it would have been to miss a curve in the rain, about how when you're that upset, that distracted, your reaction time slows. You don't see the hazards. You don't make the correction in time. Maybe it was an accident after all, or maybe Brian had simply found the perfect way to murder someone without ever touching them. Sunday dinner at Emily's house. Brian answered the door with his usual smile, the one that said he was glad to see you, but also had somewhere more important to be. "Rick, come in. Come in. Emily's just finishing up in the kitchen." Their home was exactly what you'd expect from a tech CEO. Modern, minimalist, expensive. Everything chosen by an interior designer to project success. The kind of place that looked like a magazine spread and felt like a hotel lobby. Cold, impersonal. Nothing out of place because nothing was actually lived in. The furniture was uncomfortable but stylish. The art was expensive but meaningless. Emily emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was thinner than I remembered, her face carefully made up to hide the exhaustion, her smile tight and practiced. When had she become so thin? When had those worry lines appeared around her eyes? "Hi, Dad." I hugged her. She felt fragile in my arms, like something that might break if I held too tight. Or maybe I was just seeing her differently now, knowing what I knew, knowing that she'd chosen this man over her own mother. Dinner was salmon and roasted vegetables, paired with a wine that Brian made a point of saying cost $200 a bottle. He dominated the conversation, talking about Oralink's latest product launch, about meetings with investors in Silicon Valley, about a profile piece some business magazine wanted to do on him. He name-dropped constantly, venture capitalists I'd never heard of, tech companies that were supposed to be impressive, restaurants that had year-long waiting lists. Emily picked at her food and said almost nothing. I watched her push a piece of salmon around her plate, cut it into smaller and smaller pieces without eating any of it. She looked up once and caught me watching, looked away quickly. I waited until dessert was served, some kind of elaborate chocolate thing that probably came from an expensive bakery, before making my move. "Brian, I've been thinking about investments lately, trying to figure out what to do with some of Grace's old accounts." He looked up from his dessert, and I saw it, just for a moment, a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear? Calculation? "Yeah? Yeah. I found some paperwork in her files about an investment she made with Oralink a few years back. Do you remember that?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A calculation being made, possibilities being assessed. Vaguely. That was a long time ago. 4 years. She put in quite a bit of money, actually. I was wondering if there's any way to check on how that investment performed, see if there are returns I should be claiming on her estate. I'd have to look into it. The early investor structure was complicated. I'm sure it was. I smiled. You wouldn't happen to have her account information handy, would you? Just so I can cross-reference with her bank records? "Dad." Emily's voice was sharp, cutting through the pretense of casual conversation. "Can we not talk about business at dinner?" "It's not business, sweetheart. It's family, your mother's legacy." "Mom's gone." Her voice cracked slightly. "Can't we just let her rest?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I saw it. The guilt, the fear, the desperate need to keep everything buried. She knew. She'd always known, and she was terrified I was about to uncover it all. I'd like to let her rest, but I keep finding things that don't make sense. Messages, transfers, documents that don't add up. "Maybe some puzzles aren't meant to be solved," Brian said, his voice carefully neutral. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just stubborn. Occupational hazard. 40 years of engineering will do that to you. You learn not to ignore structural problems." When I left, Emily walked me to the door, while Brian stayed in the dining room, presumably to give us privacy, but more likely to avoid further questions. "Dad, please, whatever you think you know, just leave it alone." "Why?" "Because some things are better left buried." I touched her cheek, feeling the sharpness of her cheekbone beneath my fingers. "Your mother used to say that bridges are built on bedrock, not quicksand. You can't build a life on lies, Emily. Eventually, everything collapses." Then let it collapse, she whispered. Just don't be the one who pushes. I drove home thinking about Austin, about Grace, about the pieces I'd already set in motion, about the look in Emily's eyes, not just fear, but resignation. Like she'd known this day was coming and had been dreading it. Emily was wrong. I wasn't going to push. I was going to pull. Carefully, precisely, one support beam at a time. And when the structure finally fell, I'd make sure Brian was standing right in the center. Austin started delivering files on Wednesday. Nothing dramatic at first. Just a few documents delivered via an encrypted email account we'd set up specifically for this purpose. Investor reports that didn't match the actual fund distributions. Board meeting minutes with entire sections redacted or missing. Transfer receipts showing money moving from Oralink's primary accounts into offshore holdings with names like Meridian Capital Partners and Cascade Investment Group, shell companies that existed only on paper. He was terrified. I could tell from the way he wrote his emails, short, clipped sentences, no unnecessary words, no signature. Every file drop came with the same message. This is the last one. I can't do this anymore. It never was. By Friday, I had enough material to begin assembling the real picture. Brian's fraud was more extensive than I'd imagined, more sophisticated and more brazen. He'd created an entire shadow financial system within Oralink, using a network of shell companies and falsified reports to hide the fact that the company's revenue was largely fictional. The legitimate business, the actual tech products Oralink developed, was probably worth about $20 million. But Brian had convinced investors the company was worth 10 times that. He'd done it by inflating user numbers, fabricating partnership deals with major corporations, and showing revenue that existed only in doctored spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. Grace's money had been one small piece of this larger fraud, but there were dozens of other victims. Pension funds that had invested retirement savings, private investors who'd mortgaged their homes, even some charitable foundations that had redirected donor money into Oralink, believing they were supporting innovative technology that would change the world. Brian had taken them all. I spent the weekend organizing everything into a comprehensive dossier. It was meticulous work, the kind of detailed analysis I'd done for decades when evaluating structural integrity. I created spreadsheets, timelines, network diagrams showing how money flowed from one shell company to another. Every claim Brian had made to investors, cross-referenced with the actual financial data Austin was providing. Every lie, documented and verified. On Monday morning, I made my first move. I sent an anonymous email to 3 journalists who specialized in corporate fraud. I'd researched them carefully. Patricia Chen at the Business Journal, Marcus Webb at Tech Investor Magazine, Sarah Kim at the Financial Tribune. All of them had written exposés before, had sources in the SEC, knew how to follow money trails. The email contained just enough information to pique their interest. Hints about Oralink's financial irregularities, a few choice document excerpts, some pointed questions about specific investor claims that didn't match public records, but not enough to reveal my identity or expose Austin as the source. Within hours, 2 of them responded requesting more information. I gave it to them. Slowly, carefully. A document here, a lead there, just enough to keep them digging without overwhelming them. Just enough to make them think they were uncovering the story themselves, that they were investigative journalists doing important work rather than puppets following a script I'd written. By Wednesday, the first article appeared. A short piece in a tech industry blog raising questions about discrepancies in Oralink's latest earnings report. Nothing conclusive, nothing damning, just questions. Why did the user numbers reported to investors not match the data from analytics platforms? Why had 3 board members resigned within the past year? Why were there gaps in the company's audited financials? But questions were enough. That evening, Brian called. I was expecting it. Rick, I don't know if you saw, but there was this ridiculous article about Oralink today. Total hack job, completely baseless. I haven't seen it, I lied smoothly. Well, if anyone asks you about it, because of Emily, just tell them it's nonsense. Disgruntled ex-employee trying to stir up trouble. We're already working with our lawyers to get it retracted. Of course, I'm sure it's nothing. How are you doing, by the way? Emily said you seemed a little off at dinner on Sunday. I'm fine, just tired. Getting old on us? He laughed, but it sounded forced, nervous. Something like that. After he hung up, I opened my laptop and sent Austin another email. He's rattled. Keep going. Austin's response came 3 hours later. Can't. Security flagged my login today. They're doing a full audit of all system access. Everyone's being interviewed. I'm being watched, Rick. This is too dangerous. My jaw tightened. I'd anticipated this possibility, but I'd hoped we'd have more time to build the case before Brian's security team started looking for leaks. I wrote back, "Stop completely. Delete everything from your work computer. Clear your browser history. We have enough to move forward." Then I spent the next 2 hours going through everything Austin had sent me, making sure I had copies of the most critical documents, the smoking guns that would be impossible for Brian to explain away. The next morning, Austin called. His voice was shaking, barely controlled panic. They fired someone. Henderson, one of the senior analysts. They're saying he was the one who leaked confidential information to the press. Was he? No. He didn't even have access to the files I pulled. But they needed someone to blame, and he'd been complaining about management for months, so they made him the scapegoat. Rick, they walked him out in front of everyone. Security escort, box of personal items, the whole humiliating ritual. His reputation is finished. Nobody in this industry will touch him now. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that collateral damage. An innocent man, destroyed because Brian needed a villain and Henderson was convenient. I'm sorry. Are you? Because that was supposed to be me. That could still be me if they keep digging. It won't be. They're looking for a leak inside the company, which means they think the threat is still there. If they'd figured out the real source, they'd have fired you, not Henderson. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you understand that we're winning. Brian's panicking. He's lashing out blindly. That means we're getting to him. He hung up without responding. I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about Henderson, about collateral damage and acceptable losses and the price of revenge, about whether what I was doing was justice or just another kind of cruelty. Then I opened my laptop and continued working, because stopping now wouldn't help Henderson. It would just mean he'd been sacrificed for nothing. That evening, the second article came out. This one was bigger, a full investigative piece in a major business publication. It detailed the questions around Oralink's finances, interviewed 3 former employees who'd noticed irregularities, and specifically called out several of the investment partnerships Brian had claimed were worth millions. The article stopped short of directly accusing Brian of fraud. Legal teams had probably stripped out the strongest language, but it asked enough sharp questions to make any reader curious. It mentioned Grace by name. Grace Lawson, a retired teacher who invested her life savings in Oralink before her passing in a car accident, and pointed out the suspicious timing of transfers from her account. My phone rang within minutes. Emily. Dad, did you see the article? This is ruining us. Brian's been on calls all evening trying to manage the fallout. Investors are asking questions. The board wants answers. Her voice trembled. Why is this happening? Maybe, I said quietly, because it's true. Don't. Don't what? Don't pretend you care about the truth. This is about Mom, isn't it? About whatever you think you found on Brian's phone? So she knew. Of course she knew. Brian must have told her, or she'd guessed, or maybe she'd known all along and had been waiting for this confrontation. Your mother spent her final days keeping Brian's secrets, protecting him, protecting you. Does that seem right to you, Emily? She was in a car accident. She lost control because she was crying so hard she couldn't see the road, because your husband was blackmailing her and you told her to stay silent. Silence. Long and terrible. Dad, please. If you have any love left for me at all, stop this. Let it go. Let us try to fix things and move on. I can't. Why not? Because she asked me to. In her final words, in a recording she made before she was gone, she asked me to make him understand what it means to lose everything. And I've never broken a promise to your mother. Not in 36 years of marriage, and I'm not starting now. Emily started crying, harsh sobs that made her words almost unintelligible. You're going to destroy us. Everything we've built. Everything we have. You're going to take it all away. No, sweetheart. He already did that. He destroyed your mother. He destroyed our family. He destroyed any chance you had at a real marriage built on honesty instead of fraud. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it. She hung up. I sat in the dark living room and thought about family, about the choices we make and the consequences we live with, about loyalty and what it really means, about whether protecting someone from the consequences of their actions is love or just another form of enabling. Then I got back to work. Because Brian Carterson's empire was beginning to crack, and I needed to make sure the collapse was complete. The walls started closing in on Brian by the end of the week. 3 more articles appeared across different publications, each one building on the last. The journalists were coordinating now, sharing sources, comparing notes. Former employees were coming forward with stories about falsified reports and pressure to inflate numbers. Investors were demanding independent audits. The SEC had started making inquiries, sending letters to Oralink's legal team. I monitored it all from my living room, tracking each development with the same clinical detachment I'd once used to review stress calculations on bridge supports. Every article, every statement, every desperate press release from Oralink's PR team, they all went into my files, organized and indexed. Austin stopped answering my emails. I didn't push. He'd given me everything I needed, and the risk to him was too great now. The company was in full lockdown mode, reviewing every employee's access logs, conducting surprise interviews, threatening legal action against anyone suspected of leaking information. Let them look. They'd never find him. I'd made sure of that. On Thursday afternoon, Martha Jennings called, my neighbor of 12 years, the woman who had brought me casseroles after Grace was gone and refused to let me sink into solitude. Rick, there's a man in a suit sitting in a car across the street from your house. Has been for the past hour. I looked out the window. Black sedan, tinted windows, the kind of car private investigators drive when they want to be noticed. How long? About an hour, like I said. You want me to call the police? No. He's probably a private investigator. Brian's trying to figure out who's behind the leaks. And is he going to find anything? Not here. I've been careful. Good. She paused. You know what you're doing, right? You're not in over your head? I've been building things for 40 years, Martha. Bridges, overpasses, structures that need to withstand earthquakes and floods and the weight of thousands of cars every day. I know exactly how to bring something down. I know exactly how deep the water is. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I know. But thank you for worrying. Friday morning brought the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. A journalist named Patricia Chen, one of the 3 I'd initially contacted, published a comprehensive exposé in a major financial news outlet. She'd done what I couldn't do from the outside. She'd gotten interviews with current Oralink employees willing to speak on the record, found documentation from the SEC's preliminary inquiry, and connected all the dots I'd carefully laid out for her. The article was devastating. It detailed the shell companies, the falsified revenue reports, the offshore accounts. It named Grace specifically as one of Brian's victims, describing how he'd manipulated her into signing documents that made her legally liable for his fraud, how he'd blackmailed her into silence, how the pressure had driven her to a mental state where she couldn't safely operate a vehicle. And it included a statement from an anonymous source, me, though they didn't know that, outlining the evidence that Grace had been blackmailed, that she'd lived in fear for years, and that her passing might not have been as accidental as everyone believed. The article went viral within hours, shared thousands of times on social media, picked up by every major news outlet, trending on Twitter under multiple hashtags. Oralink's stock, which had already been dropping all week, went into free fall. Trading was halted before noon to prevent a complete collapse. My phone exploded with calls. Journalists requesting interviews, lawyers asking about my willingness to testify if charges were filed, former colleagues wondering what the hell had happened, people I hadn't talked to in years, suddenly interested in my connection to the story. I ignored all of them except one, Austin. "Did you see?" His voice was hushed, awed, like he couldn't quite believe what was happening. "It's over. He's finished. The board issued a statement saying they're launching an independent investigation. People are being escorted out of the building. The whole company is in chaos." "Are you okay?" "I think so. Nobody's looking at me. They're too busy trying to figure out damage control, trying to salvage what's left of the company." He laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I can't believe we actually did it." "Not done yet," I said. "This is just the foundation. Now comes the hard part." "What's the hard part?" "Making sure he knows who did this to him." I sent an email to Brian. Simple, direct, impossible to ignore. "We need to talk. Dinner at my place Sunday evening. Bring Emily. There are things you both need to understand." His response came within minutes. "Whatever you think you know, Rick, you're wrong. This is all a misunderstanding that will be cleared up." I wrote back, "Then you have nothing to worry about. See you Sunday at 6. Saturday passed in a strange, suspended calm. I cleaned the house, room by room, until everything was spotless. Went grocery shopping, bought ingredients for a proper meal, moved through the motions of normal life while my mind churned with anticipation, with the knowledge that tomorrow everything would finally come to a head. Martha came over in the afternoon, let herself in through the back door like she always did. "You look calm," she observed. "Suspiciously calm." "I am calm." "Rick, what are you planning?" "Just a family dinner." She studied me, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "You're going to do something tomorrow, aren't you? Something final." I didn't answer. "Do you want me there? As your witness?" "Yes." "Then I'll be there." "What time?" 6:30, after dinner. Sunday arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that makes you think winter will never end. I spent the morning cooking, pot roast, roasted potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal Grace used to make for family dinners. Comfort food, the kind of food you serve when you want people to feel safe and relaxed, when you want to lower their defenses. I set the dining room table for 4. Checked the connections on my laptop, made sure everything was ready, made sure the TV was working, the sound was good, the video files would play without glitches. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Brian and Emily stood on the porch. Emily looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep or both. Brian looked defensive, shoulders tight, jaw set, like a boxer expecting a punch. "Come in," I said. "Dinner's almost ready." We ate in near silence. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick enough to choke on. Emily picked at her food without eating. Brian made a few attempts at conversation that faded in the heavy air. Finally, over coffee, Brian said, "Okay, Rick, we're here. What do you want?" I stood up and walked to the TV. I'd already connected my laptop, loaded the files I needed, queued everything up. I turned on the screen. "I want you to watch something." The first image appeared. Grace, smiling that secret smile. Emily gasped. Brian went pale. "That's your phone, the one you forgot here 2 weeks ago." The image changed, screenshots of the message thread, Grace's words, Brian's threats. "Dad, please," Emily started. "Not done yet." Grace's audio recording began to play. Her voice filled the room, trembling as she described the fraud, the manipulation, the way Brian had trapped her. He said he'd destroy you if I told. I'm sorry, Rick. Emily was crying. Brian sat frozen. The recording ended. I turned to face them. For 3 years, I believed your mother's accident was just that. An accident. But it wasn't, was it, Brian? You were as responsible as if you'd driven her off that road yourself. That's insane, Brian said. Grace invested voluntarily. If she had concerns, she could have hired a lawyer. She was terrified. You made sure of that. I made sure she understood the legal implications. That's not blackmail. That's business. It's murder. Brian stood up. I'm done listening to this. Emily, we're leaving. Sit down, I said quietly. Excuse me? Sit down. Because if you walk out that door, I press send on an email that goes to every investor in Oralink, every board member, and every law enforcement agency. An email containing everything. Grace's recordings, the documents Austin pulled, the witness statements. Everything. He stared at me. You're bluffing. I held up my phone. Try me. Emily stood up. Dad, you can't do this. Think about what you're doing to our family. Our family ended 3 years ago on Morrison Road. You laid it to rest when you chose him over your mother. I was trying to protect everyone. You were protecting yourself, your house, your lifestyle, and it cost your mother her life. Emily collapsed back, sobbing. Brian's face had gone red. You think you've won? You think destroying my company will bring her back? No, but it'll make sure you understand what she felt. The fear, the helplessness. I turned back to the laptop. I'm going to send this email now. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know what you did. The SEC will file charges. Your investors will sue. Your company will cease to exist. Dad, don't... I looked at Emily. Your mother asked me to do this. Can you give me one good reason why I should ignore her final request? She had no answer. I turned to Martha, standing in the kitchen doorway. You're my witness. My finger hovered over the button. Brian lunged at me. He was fast. His shoulder hit my chest, and we crashed into the coffee table. My laptop skidded across the floor. Brian's hands found my throat. You think you can destroy me? I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. I grabbed his wrists, but he was stronger. Martha was there, pulling at Brian. He shoved her off. Emily stood frozen. My hand found the lamp. I swung it hard. Glass shattered. Brian fell aside, clutching his head as red trickled through his fingers. I gasped for air, crawled toward my laptop. Don't, Brian said. He was on his feet, red streaking down his face. I picked up the laptop, opened it. I'm going to give you one chance. Tell Emily the truth. Admit what you did, or I press send right now. Brian's chest heaved. Fine. You want the truth? He turned to Emily. Your mother was weak. She was stupid and scared. When she found out about the investment structure, she panicked, started threatening to go to the SEC. She was going to destroy everything. Emily's face crumpled. Brian? So yes, I used her signature. Yes, I moved money through her accounts. And yes, I told her that if she talked, I'd make sure she went down with me. Because she would have. She'd signed the papers. Legally, she was just as culpable. She trusted you. She was naive. And that naivety destroyed her, not me. She's the one who got into that car in tears. The room was silent except for Emily's crying. Do you see it now? I asked her. Do you see what he is? She just kept crying. I turned back to Brian. Get out of my house. What? Get out. The email's going out tonight either way. Brian grabbed Emily's arm. Come on. She pulled away. Don't touch me. Emily, don't ever touch me again. He stared at her, then at me. Then he walked to the door. This isn't over. Yes, I replied. It is. After he left, Emily collapsed. Martha went to her. Dad, Emily whispered. I'm so sorry. I know. What's going to happen to me? That depends on how involved you were. But Emily, whatever happens, it's what you deserve. She wiped her eyes. Are you really going to send it? I turned back to the laptop. I thought about Grace, about her voice on that recording. Yes, I said, and I pressed send. The email went out to 47 recipients. Within minutes, my phone started ringing. I turned it off. Emily left an hour later. Martha stayed until midnight, helping me clean up. You did the right thing, she said. Did I? Grace would think so. After she left, I sat in the dark. Everything felt suspended, but underneath was something else. Relief. I'd done it. I'd kept my promise to Grace, and tomorrow, the whole world would know. I went to bed and slept dreamlessly for the first time in 3 years. Monday morning came with thunder. The story broke everywhere, every major outlet. The evidence was airtight and damning. By noon, federal investigators had raided Oralink's offices. Brian was taken into custody. The company's assets were frozen. The board announced Brian's immediate termination. I watched it unfold from my living room, coffee in hand. Austin called that afternoon, shaking with relief. It worked. Jesus Christ, it actually worked. Brian's finished. That was the plan. I can't believe we pulled it off. You pulled it off. You took the risk. Why does it feel so terrible then? Henderson still got fired. People are losing their jobs. Brian caused that damage when he chose to commit fraud. We just made sure people saw it. Still feels like we hurt innocent people. Welcome to justice. It's messier than revenge. After we hung up, I opened Grace's files. Listened to her voice one more time. I did it, I said aloud. He's lost everything. Tuesday brought lawsuits. Investors suing Brian, suing the board. Criminal charges were expected within days. The press found more victims. Other people Brian had manipulated. Grace wasn't the only one. That knowledge made me angrier. She'd been one victim among many. Martha came by in the evening with dinner. You're not eating enough. She made me sit while she heated up chicken and rice. How do you feel? Really? I thought about it. Empty. Like I've been working toward this one goal for so long that now that it's done, I don't know what comes next. That's normal. You spent weeks building up to this. The aftermath is always harder. Wednesday brought Emily back to my door. She looked terrible. Can I come in? We sat in the living room. I'm cooperating with the investigation. My lawyer says if I'm fully honest, they might offer immunity. That's good. Is it? I feel like a traitor. He's not your husband anymore. He's a criminal. I know, but we were together for 7 years. He was the reason your mother is gone. He did. Maybe not in the eyes of the law, but he broke her spirit, took away her joy, and that's what sent her into that rainstorm. So yes, he's the reason she's gone. She started crying. I should have protected her. Yes, you should have. I'm sorry. I wanted to forgive her. But the words wouldn't come. I need time. I need time to figure out if I can look at you without seeing all the choices you made. How much time? I don't know. Maybe forever. She flinched. That's fair. After she left, I wondered if I'd been too harsh, but I couldn't lie to her. Thursday marked 1 week since the email. The coverage was shifting to broader implications. Austin sent a message. Henderson got hired by a competitor. Better job, better pay. That was something. Friday brought the first official charges. Brian was indicted on 14 counts of fraud. Bail was set at $5 million. The judge denied house arrest. He'd spend the next months in prison, waiting for trial. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Just hollow acknowledgement. The weekend was quiet. I worked in the yard, kept busy. On Sunday, I drove to Grace's grave. It's done. He's ruined. Lost everything, Exactly what you asked for. I stayed until sunset. That night, there was a message from Emily. I'm moving out of state. Fresh start. I didn't respond. The house felt bigger that night, emptier. I'd destroyed Brian, but it didn't bring anything back. Revenge, I was learning, was a cold comfort. 3 weeks after the email, I finally started sorting through what came next. Brian's trial was scheduled for early next year. I'd been asked to testify, and I'd agreed. Austin came to visit. He looked better, less haunted. He'd left Oralink, found a position at a smaller firm. I wanted to thank you for reminding me that some things are worth risking everything for. You paid a high price. Yeah, but I'm okay. And Brian's where he belongs. He paused. How are you doing? Figuring it out. Some days are better than others. After he left, I checked the news coverage. More articles about Brian, about expanding investigations, about other victims. One article mentioned Grace specifically, quoted from her recording. Hearing her words in a news article felt invasive, but also right. That evening, Martha came by with dinner. She'd been doing that regularly now. You're looking better. More color in your face. She started unpacking containers. I ran into Patricia Chen today, the journalist. She wanted me to ask if you'd consider an interview about Grace. I already told her no. She's persistent. Said she wants to make sure Grace's story is told properly. I thought about it. The idea of having my grief packaged made my skin crawl, but Grace deserved to have her story told. I'll think about it. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I did the right thing? She set down her fork. Do you? Most of the time. But sometimes I wonder if I just made everything worse. Rick, you listened to her recording. She asked you to do exactly what you did. She was scared. Maybe if she'd had more time, she would have changed her mind. Maybe. But you'll never know that. All you have is what she actually said. Martha squeezed my hand. You made a promise. You kept it. Even if it cost me Emily? Emily made her own choices. Those were her decisions. After Martha left, I found myself thinking about identity, who I had been before Grace was gone, who I became after, and who I was now. I wasn't sure if that was better or worse, just different. I opened Emily's last message, started typing a response, then deleted it. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new document and started writing everything down. The whole chain of events. Maybe someday it would help me make sense of it all. I wrote until midnight, until the story was complete. Then I went to bed and dreamed of bridges collapsing, structural supports giving way one by one. I woke up sweating, but underneath the fear was relief. November came with cold rain. I forced myself out every day, learning how to be alone without being lonely. The trial preparations continued. I met with prosecutors twice. They were confident. We want him to stand trial. We want a jury to see exactly what he did. I agreed. In mid-November, Patricia Chen called. I know you've declined interviews, but I wanted to reach out one more time. Ms. Chen, please, just hear me out. Your wife's story, what Brian did to her, it's not unique. But the way you exposed him is. I'm offering a platform to make sure Grace's story is heard. I was quiet for a long time. One interview, on my terms, at my house, and I have final approval. Done. Thank you. We scheduled it for the following week. Patricia arrived exactly on time. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and gentle manner. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for listening. She started with simple questions. How did I meet Grace? What was she like? I told her about our 36 years together. Then I told her about finding Brian's phone. What made you decide to fight back? Her recording. When I heard her voice asking me to make sure Brian understood what it meant to lose everything, I couldn't ignore that. She asked about the planning, about Emily, about the cost. My daughter made her choices. She knew what Brian did and chose to protect him. I can't forgive that. The interview lasted 3 hours. When will this run? Probably in 2 weeks. The article came out as promised. Fair, thoughtful, respectful. It went viral. Grace became the face of Brian's fraud. Advocacy groups started using it. Lawyers representing other victims reached out. I said yes to all of it. Austin called. People are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who kept a promise. Now I just had to figure out what came next. That evening I got a call from an unknown number. Emily. Dad? Emily. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I've been in therapy. My therapist suggested I call you. Is that what you want? Or just what your therapist wants? Both. I want to talk to you, but I understand if you're not ready. I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't know if I'll ever be, but I am willing to listen. That's more than I deserve. We talked for 30 minutes. She apologized again. She cried. I didn't promise anything, but I didn't hang up either. When we ended the call, I felt exhausted, but not angry. Progress, maybe. New Year's Eve. I spent alone. I made dinner, poured expensive whiskey, and sat with Grace's photo album. At midnight, I raised my glass to Grace's photo. I did it. Kept my promise. Made sure Brian paid. I hope you're proud of me. The house was silent, but somehow I felt like she heard me. January brought something new. I reached out to the university about teaching again. They were interested, very interested. We agreed on terms. One course, starting in January. It wasn't much, but it was something, a purpose beyond revenge. Brian's trial date was set for February. I'd been subpoenaed as a witness. The first day of class, I was nervous. But once I started talking about load-bearing calculations and structural integrity, it all came back. After class, several students came up with questions. One had heard about the Brian Carterson case. Yes, both require careful analysis, attention to detail, understanding of structural weaknesses. Whether you're building something or taking it apart, the principles are the same. Teaching became my anchor. I was building again. Building knowledge, building relationships, building a life with purpose. Austin stopped by one evening in late January. Wanted to check in before the trial starts, make sure you're ready. As ready as I can be. They're going to come at you hard. Brian's lawyers. They'll try to paint you as obsessed, vindictive. I know. And you're okay with that? I have the truth on my side. And the evidence. They can say whatever they want. The facts don't change. He nodded. You're remarkably calm about this. I spent 2 months planning Brian's downfall. Another 3 months watching it happen. I've had time to make peace with what I did. No regrets? Some, but not about Brian. After he left, I sat down and wrote out my testimony. What I'd say, how I'd say it, how I'd handle cross-examination. I wanted to be prepared, precise, unshakable. Because this was it, the final step, the last chance to make sure Grace's story was heard, and I wasn't going to let anyone diminish what she'd been through. The trial began on a cold Monday in February. I sat in the courthouse waiting room, wearing the suit I'd worn to Grace's funeral. It felt appropriate, like I was burying Brian the same way I'd buried her. Martha had come with me. You ready? I am. The prosecution called me late in the afternoon. I walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Brian sat at the defense table, flanked by lawyers. He'd aged, thinner, grayer. He stared at me with hatred or fear. I didn't care. The prosecutor led me through my testimony, how I'd found the messages, Grace's recording, the evidence of fraud. Mr. Lawson, in your opinion, what led to your wife's passing? Brian Carterson. He might not have been in the car, but he pushed her into a state where she couldn't drive safely. He was as responsible as if he'd forced her off the road himself. The defense objected. The judge sustained it. But the point was made. Cross-examination was predictable. Brian's lawyer tried to paint me as vengeful, suggested I'd manipulated evidence. I stayed calm, answered directly, without emotion. Mr. Lawson, you orchestrated a campaign to destroy my client's business. I provided journalists with evidence of fraud. The consequences are his. You wanted revenge. I wanted justice. What's the difference? I looked at Brian. Justice is about accountability. Revenge is about inflicting pain. I didn't do this to hurt your client. I did it to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he hurt my wife. After 2 hours, the defense gave up. I stepped down and walked past Brian's table. He looked small, defeated, good. The trial continued for another week. Other witnesses testified. Austin testified remotely, his identity protected. Emily testified too, though we didn't speak. She confirmed everything, broke down on the stand. Part of me ached for her, but a larger part remained unforgiving. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all 14 counts. When the verdict was read, Brian's face went white. Sentencing was 3 weeks later. I attended. The judge gave Brian 20 years. As bailiffs led Brian away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. His expression was complicated. Anger, but also something that might have been respect. I met his eyes and felt nothing. Outside, reporters swarmed. I gave a brief statement, then Martha and I walked away. How do you feel? Complete. It's done. That evening, I drove to Grace's grave. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. 20 years, that's what he got. I know it doesn't bring you back. But he paid, Grace. He paid for every lie, every threat, every moment of fear. The wind moved through the trees. I kept my promise. I made him see what fear looks like. Made him understand what it means to lose everything. I stayed until sunset. Then I drove home. But it wasn't quite as quiet anymore. I had students, Austin and his family, Martha, even the possibility of eventually rebuilding something with Emily. I had a life to live, not the life I'd planned, but a life nonetheless. And for the first time since Grace was gone, that felt like enough. I made dinner, a proper meal, and ate at the table, cleaned up, poured whiskey. Then I sat in my chair and looked around the living room. At all the spaces Grace used to occupy, now filled with my own presence instead of her absence. We won, I said aloud. You and me, we won. And somewhere deep in my chest, where grief and rage had lived for 3 years, I felt something shift, into peace, into closure, into satisfaction. I'd done what Grace asked, I'd kept my promise. I'd made sure Brian Carterson paid for destroying her. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad? Emily's voice was small, hesitant. Emily. I watched the news, the sentencing. 20 years. Yes. How do you feel? I thought about it. Like I can finally breathe. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. For everything. For choosing him. For not protecting Mom. For being too weak to do the right thing. I know you are. Will you ever forgive me? I looked at Grace's photo on the mantel, at her smile, the real one I'd known for 36 years. Maybe. Someday. But not today. That's fair. She paused. Can I call you again? Not now, but later, when you're ready. Yes, I said. You can call. After we hung up, I walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Streetlights casting yellow pools on the pavement, a dog barking somewhere distant. Normal life continuing all around me. I thought about Austin, about how he'd risked everything to help me, about Martha, who'd stood by me when I needed a witness, about all the people Brian had hurt, who were finally seeing justice. And I thought about Grace, about the woman I'd loved for 36 years, about her courage in leaving that recording, in asking me to do what she couldn't. I'd built bridges for 40 years, structures meant to connect, to carry weight, to last. And I'd learned that every bridge needs a solid foundation, that you can't build on shifting ground. Brian had tried to build an empire on lies, and like any structure built on weak foundations, it had collapsed. I'd made sure of that. I raised my glass one more time. To grace, to justice, to the future I was still learning how to build. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed. For the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night without nightmares, without waking up reaching for someone who wasn't there, without the crushing weight of grief and helplessness. Because I'd kept my promise, because Brian Carterson understood finally what it meant to lose everything, because Grace could rest, and so could I.